Willkommen beim Nerds of Law Podcast. Die Nerds of Law, das sind Katharina Bisset und Michael Lanzinger. Wir präsentieren euch Neuigkeiten zu Recht und Technik, spannende Interviews sowie Tipps und Tricks generell zur geekigen Seite des Rechts. Denn vergesst nie, Law is the ultimate science.
Nerds of Law, episode 131. 35 Years of Value-Based Pricing with Ron Baker. Dear listeners, welcome to today's Nerds of Law podcast episode, and just a fair warning in advance, I might be giggling a lot because I'm having a massive fangirl moment, and for those of you who've been listening to the podcast a lot know that I've been mentioning Ron Baker. I don't know, I shouldn't start a drinking game on that because it would get very, very dangerous. We've got...
Yes, we would get high levels, actually.
I think between you and Simon Sinek, I think both those drinking games would not be a good idea.
A lot of shots. So much shots.
For those who forgot, Ron Baker is the value pricing guru, really. I first came across him on his episode of the Lawyerist podcast.
Can we say the most value pricer?
We're still working on that, Michael. After that, and I think it was the first time in the Lawyerist podcast where the things that gut feeling wise I wanted to do and I like to do, I first got put into a framework, and then I read all the books, which we'll obviously link to, but I think I'll hand over to Ron now before I'm just talking all the time. So Ron, please introduce yourself to our audience and tell them what's your background and how did you get here?
Thanks, Katharina. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to this. I'm actually a recovering CPA, and I knew I wanted to be a CPA basically in high school. And I had a really good high school accounting teacher. He did a 2-year program. He also taught us how to do taxes. So I ran a tax clinic at the high school, and kids would come in, and then we'd file their income tax. They'd slip me a 20, and I started practicing accounting. My dad was a barber. I did his business's books. I did a bunch of his colleagues and friends' books. I did tax returns. I represented people before the IRS. This is all in high school. And by the way, the whole time I'm billing time. I'm filling out a timesheet. Why? Because my dad, being a barber, had a lot of CPAs and lawyer clients. And when you're getting your hair cut, guess what? You're a captive audience for about an hour. And I'd sit in front of both CPAs and lawyers, because I really enjoyed talking to lawyers as well. And I would ask them about their practice and how they build and what, and they told me, you got to keep time, you got to do a timesheet. And that's what I did. And then that's how I put myself through college. And then when I got out, I started working at the Big 8, and I did timesheets, and I talked about what we sold. We could only sell our time and all of that. And then after I left the Big 8, after 2.5 years, I opened up my own practice. And I was path dependent. I did what I did in the past. I billed time, I kept timesheets, and I realized really fast that the hourly billing method was a lousy customer experience. This would have been around 1988, 1989. And I walked into my partner's office one day and I said, we need to change this. We need to give our customers a fixed price up front. Every other business on the planet does it. I go to my mechanic, he gives me a quote. I hire a contractor, a plumber, somebody to fix my garage, whatever. They give me a quote. They don't charge me by the hour. Now, they may be doing that behind the scenes, but the point is, as the customer, I know the price before I engage them, and I can make a decision if it's worth it to me or not to go forward. And we just started doing that. He said, let's try it. So we tried it. And Katharina, the customers loved it. And we were terrible at it. We made every mistake under the sun. This was in 1989. There were no books on it. There was nobody on the circuit talking about it.
Not even some scrolls on it.
Nope, nothing. And it was happening in the corporate world. Pricing was starting to become a big issue, but I didn't know any of that. Also, come to find out later, a few years later, that there was a book published by the American Bar Association. I believe the first one was in 88 or 89.
Wow.
By a guy named Richard Reed. And I have all three of them here right behind me. And these were expensive books, like $200 professional books. And they were basically saying we need to get rid of the billable hour and do upfront pricing. Ago. Exactly.
Wow.
So this is nothing new. And so we did this, and it worked so well after we got better with it, because we stuck with it because the customers loved it. And since I wanted to improve the customer experience, that was the motivation for me to do this. It wasn't all the economics and all the marketing that we talk about, that I subsequently talk about and publish and write in my books. It was, I wanted to improve the customer experience. And that's exactly what it did. And that led us to stick with it. It also enabled us to up our prices, get a better class of customers. And since we weren't selling time, we no longer needed to track it. So we got rid of our timesheets in 1989. And of course, our team members loved that. So it made it super easy to attract top talent. Because if you work for us, we're going to treat you like an adult, not like you're in a prisoner that has to account for every 6 minutes of their day. And so I got so excited by this that I started to teach it to fellow CPAs in CPA societies and conferences starting in about 1994. And then I published a book in 98. That book took off around the world, and it sold 40,000 copies, which was interesting because it was a $150 book. So I subsequently sold my interest in the practice, which my partner still runs to this day. And this was in 2000, and I've been writing and teaching and consulting ever since.
That is amazing. And I think some of your older books are even really hard to come by. But I got, obviously, Implementing Value-Based Pricing and Time's Up. And you said, which I found very interesting, that your motivation was the customer interest. I think for me, it was really hating to record every dinky little thing I do. So for me, it was like really, it annoyed me to no extent. And I also get a lot of feedback of that being very, very positive. I would not accept a painter that came around and said, look, I'm billing, I don't know what a painter's hourly rate could be, 70, 100, whatever, euros an hour, and I'll paint your room. And I was like, great, but that does not tell me anything. But I recently had, and I wanted to take the opportunity because I was, a little bit confused by that argument from an in-house, so from a business point of view. I got the argument against the value-based pricing against packages that if you incentivize efficiency in an attorney, that the quality of the work would go down. So only in paying them the hourly rate, an attorney would take enough time and do proper work.
Thou shall not be efficient, obviously.
Yeah, so since my mind still reels from this, Ron, I'm just going to pass this question on to you.
I was asked the very same thing by the Supreme Court Justice of Western Australia. I was in his chambers, and he was taking notes as I was talking. There was probably nothing more exciting than having the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court take notes while you talk. Very nice guy. He asked me exactly that same question. Won't lawyers cut corners if they give a fixed price up front? No matter how it's based, whether it's value-based or just an estimation of hours or whatever, but a fixed price, hey, here's the price and we're sticking to it. And here's my response to this. If any professional cuts their quality standards, the market's going to take them out. I don't care how you price, whether it's billable hours, and malpractice can happen under any business model, right? If you're incompetent or you do substandard or work that doesn't rise to professional standards. So not a good business strategy to cut corners on quality any more than it would be for an airline to cut safety or maintenance standards, because killing your customers is just not a good business strategy, because corpses don't tend to buy anything.
I would like to insert some clapping here. I won't do it now, but
you can clap, Michael. It's okay.
I can clap. Yeah, but maybe it's edited. I'm doing a verbal clapping here. So go,
okay.
Ron, go.
Okay, so fair enough. The other thing is, what about misaligned incentives the other way? What about incenting somebody to take as long as it takes with no consideration of the outcome that you're trying to achieve? A professional is somebody who is professionally responsible for creating and achieving a result, not performing a task or a series of tasks. That's a day labor. Walk my dog, clean my gutters, mow my lawn. But we're professionals. We're supposed to get to an outcome or a result in not the most efficient manner, but in the most efficacious manner, meaning achieving the best result possible. And the problem with the billable hour is it misaligns the incentives, because the lawyer is now incentive to take as long as it takes and to bill more hours, and the customer, all they care about is the result. So I think there's a bigger misalignment. And if you look at the ethical complaints against lawyers, it's always because they surprise their customers with the bill.
Yes.
It usually doesn't happen with firms that price everything up front. The other thing I would say is, and there's subtext to this question, I think, Katharina,
Okay.
and it really bothers me because it's this: do professionals have to be highly compensated to do the right thing?
Ooh.
I kind of resent that implication. I'm going to do the
wow.
right thing regardless of how you're paying me, because I'm a professional. I've sworn a duty. I know we don't take oaths like doctors, but we might as well.
Well, I took an oath.
Yeah. It's
Okay,
kind of an
fair
oath,
enough.
yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
know that.
We actually have to take an oath. So
Do lawyers in the States take oaths?
Actually no idea.
I don't think they do, but I'll check into that.
We get sworn in
Yep.
kind of with the president of our state
The bar?
bar association, so
Yeah.
Okay.
the local bar where we belong to.
Okay. Yeah, there might be some ceremony. And one more point, and then, Mikhail, I'd like your take on it, but one more point. As part of value pricing, one of the things that we advocate is that you provide a value guarantee to your customers, which basically says, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, if you're not satisfied with your experience in working with our firm, it's not based on an outcome. We're not talking about a contingency, because I know professionals can't guarantee that you're going to win the case or, beat the IRS or whatever. But it says, if you're not happy with your experience in dealing with our firm, only pay for the value which you think you received. And so you put a value guarantee on everything. And that, by definition, is incredibly professional, because if the customer is not satisfied, then they don't have to pay. And we should be willing to do that. We should be willing to put our money where our mouth is. We say how good we are. We say how many customers love us, and we have client testimonials and all of that. Well, let's back it up. Let's back up our words and our marketing with an actual promise, and that's the value guarantee. And we started doing that. By the way, we didn't do that right out of the gate, but when we did it, we never got that guaranteed pulled. Nobody pulled the trigger on it, but it let customers know that we were serious about what we did, and we're going to do everything to delight you. And if you're not, you only have to pay what you think it's worth. And I think that made us better professionals as a result.
Yeah. And I think even if you don't voice that guarantee, if I had the feeling of, okay, that clause wasn't good, or a client's coming back to say, no, we talked about this was different, you need to rewrite this, I'm going to do it regardless, because I'm liable for this stuff.
That's right.
So even if I was billing by the hour, reworking this, I would never fill out the timesheet with that. And I've heard so many colleagues complain about the fights that they have over invoices, and now I've never once had an argument. Yeah, sometimes people pay late, but it was never about the amount or what's this. Sometimes can you maybe change this as well, and then I do it, and I don't, not even worth writing down or discussing a price for a change request. But I've never once discussed an invoice. It was really only ever about, okay, are you going to pay in time? So yes, that's and thank you for that. And I felt a bit like I could not believe that this was even an argument. And of all the things that I've heard for the billable hour, that for me, my deepest gut feeling was this is just absurd, but I couldn't voice it. And thanks for that. And what you just said just resonates so much because it put into words what my gut feeling was like. What? Yeah.
With billing, with hourly billing, you bill in arrears. You bill after the fact, after you've done all the work, recorded all the time. And that's a lousy time to find out that the customer doesn't like your price. I'd rather find out before I do the work. Maybe there's a different legal strategy we can deploy at a more reasonable price that will achieve, largely the same result. But either way, you're going to find out before you do the work and before you start to damage the relationship, because even if you send an invoice that the customer doesn't like and you end up writing down or sometimes writing off completely the time, even if the client stays with you, the relationship's taken a hit. Trust has taken a hit. And as they say, trust walks in, but it gallops away. It's very hard to rebuild trust after it's been shattered. And that's why I went to this method, because I didn't like finding out after the fact that the customer didn't like my price. Why don't we know that before we do the work, and then there's things we can do about it?
Yeah. If a client expects terms and conditions to, I don't know, cost €100, then I'd rather know straight away, so I won't even bother.
Exactly. Because sometimes you have to walk away from the customer, and it's not because the price is wrong, it's because the customer's wrong.
Yeah. Luckily, though, more and more people, more and more colleagues, especially in the legal field, say, okay, we need to change this. I want to get more into fixed prices, even value-based prices, which I always see like as the next level to fixed prices. And you help professional service firms, professional service providers to do that. And you wrote on your website at VeraSage to once and for all bury the billable hour and timesheet in the profession. So really, really, really like that. What I wonder is, what's your approach? So if someone comes to you and is like, okay, I've heard about this thing, I want to do this, or I've got clients who demand it, and I can't go on with the billable hour. How do you go about? How do you help people there?
I'm thrilled to say it's become easier over the decades, because to paraphrase Oscar Wilde, while hourly billing has no enemies, it's intensely disliked by its friends. And it's becoming even more so. So people know the billable hour, there's problems with it, and they're more motivated than ever, especially with all the technology coming down the pike with AI, with large language models that enable, it's kind of like a calculator for words and language. We can do more things in less time. Technology eats hours. And if it eats hours, then you can't have a business model that's predicated on we sell time. It's got to be predicated on we create value. It's got to put the relationship more at the center than the transaction. So it's really done with education, I would say, first. You get everybody singing on the same page in a firm about the need to do this, why you're doing it, why it's a better customer experience, why it creates more value. Then you experiment with it. You can do it in small steps. The great thing about value pricing is it's one customer at a time. You're converting one customer at a time, and then you've got to make sure that there's enthusiasm, that you share your successes, you share your failures internally, you learn from them, and you keep getting better. And it's a skill, it's an art, but it's also a skill, meaning the more you do it, the better you're going to get. And we really do it by reframing the value proposition of the firm. What we're offering now with value pricing is certainty in price. It's just like a fixed rate mortgage versus a variable rate. People will pay a premium to be certain of their mortgage payments. And it's the same thing here. People will pay a premium even over the billable hour. Ooh. As long as it's certain in price. And so it's converting that. It's finding people in the firm that are willing to experiment, to take some customers and convert them, and then run the numbers, see what happens, and then prove it to the rest of the firm. And it's really about, when you really boil this down, and this took me a little while to figure out after consulting for so many years, but we're not really converting firms. We're changing minds, but that's done one at a time. I don't change the thinking of a firm. I change the thinking of the people inside the firm. So even if the firm doesn't convert to value pricing and sticks with the old ways, somebody might leave that firm whose mind I have changed and start their own firm and do it the right way.
Yeah, that's great. And you also put in a very, very good point about efficiency, about automation. And I mean, we've been the legal tech bubble, or normal working, as all the other industries would call it, has been talking about
we call it advantage.
Yeah, has been talking about efficiencies. Yeah, and Michael and I were in a course and talking about automation, where the colleagues like, why would I automate that if I can bill, I don't know, it was €100 an hour for my associate to do this. And you just like, you don't know what to say at that point. I didn't know what to say.
It was a dark day.
Yeah, but I've got another really funny story. So the whole AI hype, and a friend came to me telling me that she was in a presentation about AI, and if AI is going to kill the billable hour. And I'm like, yeah, whoever does it, whoever pulls the trigger, I don't care. But the presenter was talking about it, and was like, yeah, and his conclusion, if you're using AI, and he was running through should you bill the costs of the AI to the client, all those absurdities. His solution was, no, they need to up the billable hour, because otherwise they're going to lose out on money. And I'm like, yeah, you do that. I'll get your client when you're done with them.
You have to up your billable hour like 100 times, because
yes.
ChatGPT can do something in a minute that would take me maybe 4, 5, 8 hours to write.
Yeah, it was great. So I'm just like, there are some people you can convert, and there are some people who are like, who are your clients? Who am I going to call? Oh, I'm going to poach that guy. So that was fantastic. But one of the more, and you said you'd have to up that more than 100 times. So calculating is one of the more reasonable questions we get. So if we're, going around harping on about how fixed prices, how value-based pricing is great, they're like, how do you calculate this? How do you know you're not going to lose out? Have you got, I think, how do you calculate fixed price? How do you determine value also as a next step? What's your advice? How would you approach this?
Right. And this is probably the hardest thing for professionals to wrap their head around, I think, because especially me being a CPA, we're very objective. We like spreadsheets. We like to carry things out to 2 decimal places. I think sometimes our profession rather be, precisely wrong rather than approximately right. And the problem with value is you can't be precise about it, because value is a feeling. It's not a number. It can't be calculated. Price is a number, but it's also a story, right? But value is a feeling. And so, for example, I'm sitting here talking to you on an Apple laptop computer that cost, I don't know, I think it was $3,500.
Yeah.
Now there's a lot of other
but we only
laptops.
take people who use Apple. So full disclosure.
Oh, okay.
Full disclosure. Sorry if it was sorry. So.
Well, that does tell you something about their price sensitivity. But there's laptops out there that are 5 times cheaper, and yet I bought Apple. Now, I can't tell you why I did that. I can't open up a spreadsheet and say, well, this is the ROI to me of owning an Apple. I didn't make a calculation. I say, because I love the company, I believe in what they stand for. I love their products. They're easy to use, but all these things, but they're all feelings. They're all emotions that really can't be quantified. And plus, I know Apple's going to take care of me if something happens. If it breaks, I just walk it in, they give me a new one, or they fix it, whatever. And so
Derek can also tell something, leaning in, because a fellow of mine, a fellow lawyer of mine, asked me. He's also into criminal law. He asked me, well, what do we? It was kind of a discussion. What do we sell? And I told him, well, what do you sell? And I said, well, I'm a legal professionist. I sell my knowledge. And I said, wrong. We criminal attorneys, we sell hope. That's the only thing we do. We don't sell time. We don't sell legal knowledge. Well, we have to sometimes, but it's based around the feeling. I've learned that also through Katharina for the past.
And it
few
hurt
years.
the first time. Admit it. It hurt. It was a feeling.
It's kind of hurt, but it's getting by. I'm getting by.
So, but that makes it kind of almost harder, though.
You know, I love that. That's beautiful. There's a famous line. It's in my book because I quote it all the time. It's Charles Revson, and Charles Revson is the founder of Revlon Cosmetics, and he said when it's in the factory, it's a tube of lipstick, but when it crosses the counter in the department store, it's hope. Ooh. He really knew what his customers were buying. And yeah, people that engage lawyers and accountants, they're buying hope, they're buying peace of mind, they're buying sleep, that things are going to be taken care of, safety, risk aversion, risk avoidance, all sorts of things. And they're all emotions. So value can't be calculated. You have to infer value. But what you can't, and since price is a number, one of the things that you can do is you can offer your customer 3 numbers. You can offer them choices and let the customer determine what price value trade-off they want to make. Most businesses do this. They offer us 3 options, small, medium, large, first class, business class, coach, and then the customer gets to decide where they want to be. And that makes complete sense because now you become a price searcher rather than just a price taker, like the people that think law or accounting is a commodity. They think they're price takers. The market sets the price. I don't have any influence over it. Well, that's not true. Otherwise, how do you explain companies like Apple and Disney and Porsche and Lexus and BMW? I mean, these are all premium companies. How do you explain Wachtell Lipton, the most profitable law firm in the world, I think? They do nothing by the billable hour because they understand that value is a feeling. Value is very spiritual, which means it can't be measured. It's not, you can't put an ROI next to it like you can with various other things that we can quantify.
But I think the first step, if you do this, is to actually get to know your customer. And that's also something I see among colleagues that most lawyers actually do not know their customers. They don't know who customers they want to attract, who they want to have in the law firm, and what do these people search, what are the feelings they have, things like that. Because that's also a thing I learned over a few years, that I exactly know what is my ideal client and how does this client think, how does he work. Well, they mostly work with drugs, but that's another story.
and I know you guys like to talk about your feelings and all that, but
yeah, we were big
all these feelings don't make me put a number to this. Sorry, I could not resist. You were just getting all.
It's like perfect.
No, that's great. I'll give you another example of this. Just a real simple one is if you look at a bottle of water. If you look at any time you enter into a transaction with a business, there's three components. There's the value to the customer, there's the price that the business is going to receive, and there's the cost to the business of producing whatever it is they're selling. And from a customer standpoint, I don't really care about your costs. That's not my job to worry about your costs. And when it comes to your price, sure, I'd like a lower price. Most customers would. But what I really want as a customer is I want to maximize the value I'm getting from you. And as a business, you'd probably like to, in turn, maximize the value that you create for me because that's what generates a lifelong relationship. So we're both invested in enhancing our value. And It's where our incentives are completely aligned, which means we need to start with the value of something. So think about a bottle of water. Now, I don't want you to think about the cost, because that's pretty easy for accountants to figure out how much it costs Coke to produce a bottle of water. Or I don't even want you to think about the price, but I want you to think about the value of that water. If you're in the desert, you haven't had water in 3 or 4 days, you'd pay a lot for that bottle of water. You might even pay everything you own and go into debt, because now that water is going to save your life. But if you're home washing the dog, the same quantity of water, now it's a lot cheaper and you're not willing to pay as much. And if you're flooded in your basement with water, now it's got a negative value because you have to pay somebody to come out and pump it out. So in all 3 cases, we have the same exact product, H2O. And the cost of getting it into those 3 locations is about the same, by the way. In other words, it's the value that varies from almost infinity to negative. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Nothing explains that. Accountants can't explain that. The economists are the only ones that can explain that, because they have a theory of value that says all value is subjective. Because cost accounting and timesheets and WIP reports and all of the metrics that we look at cannot explain why the same bottle of water goes from an infinite value to a negative value. And so value has to be inferred. And like you said, Michelle, that you have to understand the customer to be able to infer that value, which means you have to have a value conversation long before you do any work for the customer. What is it they're trying to achieve? Are those expectations realistic? Do we have to reset those expectations? And can we help this customer? Because professionally, that's our duty, is to try and create the most efficacious result we can. And that doesn't mean we can guarantee the outcome, but it does mean that we should strive towards the aspiration. And we don't do that. We tend to jump into scope of work, because that's where the billable hour focuses. How many tasks are we going to have to do, and how many briefs, and what's it going to how many hours is it going to take? And that all comes at the expense of focusing on the result that we're trying to create for the customer.
Yeah, but the thing is that, again, I think most lawyers don't know what the goal actually is. They think that the goal is, well, I win this case, or I get him out, or things like that. But I've learned that from my clients, it's actually not that important if they get a low or a high sentence. It's virtually not very important. It's very important when they see the light of day again without being imprisoned. That's the only thing.
Are you just trying to say that a lot of your clients are guilty, so they don't care about getting out?
Yes, actually, yes. Yes, this is actually what I'm saying. Because if somebody would measure
management.
No, if somebody would measure me of how many people I get out of court pleading not guilty, that would be not very, very many, actually, because most of my clients are in fact guilty, and the main value I provide is to lower the sentence as much as possible. This is what right. I do, and this also. The other thing is, well, I'm not a magician, unfortunately.
No, I've got.
It would be good.
I've got clients who are very price aware. So a lot of legal departments start with, spending, having budgets and all that. And there are some when I'm like, okay, what's your budget? And some come with, I need this contract reviewed. I've got, I don't know, 500 euros. And I'm like, yeah, okay. And one time, and the first, with that client, so now we're at a point where they basically tell me what it's worth to them. And I've never had the feeling that it was like gut-wise way off. And the first time we did this, and I knew, so the head of legal, I knew what her mindset was. She told me what she needed in detail, and I was like, and if I can write her an offer. So for most of the things she wanted, I've got fixed prices. I've got a price list. I can calculate that. And then I said, well, what do you want to pay? And she said 5,000 euros. I said, okay. Just like that. I was like, yeah, sounds about right. And then we did the test. And then we did the test by comparing that to my price list, I would have actually ended up at 4,800. So I'm like, yeah. so that proved the point. But from then on, and I've been through the fair, fixed prices. I think I can still learn a lot about the value, because I feel like I don't take the risk into account enough. But then is the yet another next level that we haven't talked about in the podcast previously a lot. It's subscription, and we're all subscribed to God knows how many things, and I always like the idea. I like the idea of scalable income a lot, and when obviously again your Lawyerist podcast episode came out where you talked about your most recent book, Time's Up. Got it. Big pen and a piece of paper, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna figure out a subscription model. And that for me was just like, okay, I need to try this just because I want to try this. This is basically my motivation. So do you want to tell our audience how subscriptions in a professional environment work, and why you think that's such a good idea?
I'm really excited by this because I do think it's where we're headed as all professionals. And it's not just a pricing change, it's a business model change. So it is completely different than value-based pricing, even though it shares some of the axioms of value pricing. There's still some things that are very relevant that we learned in value pricing that are still relevant for subscription. But subscription takes everything to a whole new level because it changes the offering. You're going to the market now. It's got to be an uncommon offering. It can't be the same old, same old. It can't be the services that all the other law firms provide. It's got to be enhanced, or what Walt Disney would call plussing the offering. He always wanted the parks to be plussed so the guests would be constantly delighted and surprised and discover new things, because then they would come back. And I've taken that concept and tried to apply it to professional firms, saying we should always constantly plus our offerings to our customers. So it's not just a pricing change, it's all about the relationship. You go from being transactional to being relational. And I know professionals always pay lip service to the relationship. We're a relationship business. That's what professionals do. We're very human-centric organizations. But when you look at our business model, we monetize the services, we monetize the transactions. This is more about not worrying about the transactions, not worrying about the scope of work, and saying to the customer, look, you're going to have these recurring needs. We're going to take care of them for this monthly price, and whatever comes up that you need that we can do. And not everybody can do everything, so it's only those things that you're really good at doing, your specialties and your areas of expertise and your niche. Maybe you only work with a particular type of customer. You're covered. We'll take care of it. We're on call. So we're monetizing everything that we say we sell: sleep, hope, peace of mind, risk avoidance. All of those types of things now are factored into this model, and I think it gives you really strong pricing power, because I think people will pay a premium to save time. If we don't waste their time, if we just take care of things as they need them and when they need them, then I think that that's an incredibly value-enhanced and plussed offering. And my model for this is something that's been happening in the States since around 1996, believe it or not, so a long time. It's called concierge medicine. And basically you subscribe to your general physician. And now these prices can range anywhere from $100 a month to up to, $5,000 a month, depending on the target audience that they're going after. But whatever they can do that you need, when you need it, you're covered. They don't take insurance, so they don't have any of the bureaucracy that a normal fee-for-service doctor does. They have fewer patients, so they can spend time with you. And that changes the model from, we're going to cure you when you're sick, to we're going to keep you healthy. And so it's a different mindset.
So, but you still say they have different price ranges, so they do limit the scope of their work, though, even though it's subscription, or is the price dependent on who the customer is?
Not necessarily. I mean, some of them do have they price by age range. So, like a pediatrician, the younger you are, usually the more expensive it is because there's more shots you have to have and more visits and more things can go wrong when you're a child than when you're older, like a teenager. But that variance is very small. What I meant, and this might have been a little confusing, I want to keep these two things separate. There's concierge doctors that charge anywhere from around $10,000 a year to up to $60,000 a year. Their target customer are the top 5%, top 10% income earners. These would be CEOs. These would be people with a lot of money, much more money than time. And so they're their personal doctor, basically. So they limit their patient panels to about 100 patients. And so when you call and you go in for a visit, you're in there for an hour or two. That's how long they'll spend with you, because they don't have to see 60 patients a day like a normal insurance doctor does. Then there's their baby cousin counterparts, which are called direct primary care doctors. These doctors limit themselves to somewhere between 500 and 600 patients, and they charge anywhere from 200, or actually I've seen as low as 100, to up to $300 or $400 a month. And they go after the middle class and even the lower middle class. And they're changing the way that healthcare is delivered. This is kind of what Matthew Kurbis is doing with his law firm that's subscription-based. He's making it available to, normal middle-class families so he can be their lawyer. He's like their general counsel, their family's general counsel. And it's kind of the same type of thing. And I love that model because now the patient, whatever they need is just taken care of. And they only have to make the pricing decision once. Once they subscribe, they get paid, they pay monthly, but it's automatic. It becomes a habit. And as long as you continuously delight them and add value, plus your offering, maybe offer, DNA testing, 23andMe analysis. Mm-hmm. Some of these doctors have pharmacies where you can get drugs and other tests on a cheaper basis. Then you're going to have that customer for life if you can keep them for 12 months. And to me, that's an exciting model because now we've taken all the services, we've taken all the scope of work off the table, and it's just whatever this patient needs. And if we can do it, they're covered. And if we can't do it, by the way, we'll get them to a specialist who can do it.
And I'm just thinking then how that could relate into legal service, because, for example, I could not do like a flat rate general counsel because there's such a limited legal fields that I can provide advice on. So like if I would, there are these, general counsel as a service and things like that. So if they came with a labor law question, I'd be like, whatever. So
I could actually provide that, and I've been asked about it. So mainly for this thing, so like completely normal persons who abide the law, in my case, and they say, well, if maybe the police on Saturday should stand before my house, so can we do something like a monthly fee that you always can be there? Something, not that it will ever happen, but maybe something. I've been asked that before.
Yeah, but then if that guy, so if this individual comes to you, for a criminal matter, you're still just talking about criminal matters. But if they come to you then and say, oh yeah, but I've got I bought some NFTs off the internet. Can you help me out of that contract because it was crap? Then you wouldn't know as much about that. So that's what I'm talking about. So I would still have to, if I was to do it, and the way I am doing it in my little corner, I still have to limit to the scope, and that's why I was asking about the different.
I would also as far as I understood it, it is also maybe about limiting the scope to actual things which I'm an expert at. So I can do the broad scope, which would be pricey, but also a small scope, just in a specialty.
Just like a general physician. Yeah, I mean, I think professionals are defined by what they don't do, the services they don't provide, and the customers they don't have. And what I mean by that is we all know what a general physician can do and what they can't do. I'm not going to go to a general physician for knee surgery or oncology services or heart surgery, but I'll probably go to them first and ask them for a referral. And then they quarterback that relationship with, and they might, and the DPC doctors will go to the appointments with you. So the new specialist understands your medical history and all of that, and they kind of work together, just like sometimes you guys work with accountants and bankers and insurance people and other
Exactly.
wealth providers. It's the same type of thing. It's really knowing what you're good at, and you stay in your lane, but then you cultivate relationships with other experts. And I think the legal profession has always been ahead of the accounting profession on this. I mean, you guys started to specialize much earlier than we did as CPAs, and doctors started before anybody. And
Yes.
this is why doctors now are full of specialties. So I love that idea of being able to call on expertise when there's something that we just don't have the capability of doing, but we can still quarterback the relationship and still bring that level of comfort to the customer.
But that's also a very, very special thing, actually, because when I refer someone to a colleague of mine, they're more likely to actually come back to me when they have a problem with which would fit actually my specialty.
Exactly.
We will be positive and assume that that is true. I mean, we have that kind of relationship with people, and if you feel like either it's a one-sided thing or they even try to poach your client, it's not going to happen again. But I think that there aren't many legal fields that couldn't recommend someone wholeheartedly. But what I'm wondering now, and you said it rightly, subscription is just a complete change to what you're doing, and I've been listening to you talk about that in Sean's webinar as well. So what I'm wondering is, in your opinion, is it as versatile as value-based pricing? Is it like, do you think it works everywhere in any kind of, we're now in the legal field, obviously, in all constellations, or do you think there's a moment where like, yeah, these cases, subscriptions don't work?
Right. And this is a great question. And boy, have I been asked this a lot and have really tried to struggle with it, because you really get some great challenges. Like, for instance, a funeral home. How do you subscribe to a funeral home? I mean, that's a transaction that's one and done, literally. But then again, creepy. I think it is creepy. But also, is it one and done? Does the funeral parlor only care about burying grandma? Or do they want to bury grandpa and all the other descendants? So maybe there is a way to do this. Maybe we're just not thinking the right way. Is it possible another challenge, is it possible to subscribe to a real estate agent? That's a very transactional deal. You buy, you sell, and then they're done. But they bring so much other expertise to the table. They know your neighborhood. They know your schools. There's other ways that they can add value even after you move in. They can find you landscapers and repair people. I just don't think we've thought about it creatively, because I think all businesses want to move from transactional to relational. The problem is we just can't get off the idea that what we're selling are products and services. Maybe we're selling something more than that, or maybe the customer's buying something more than that. They're buying transformations. They're buying where they are to where they want to be, some desired future state. And so I think there is ways for this. I mean, we're seeing lawyers that are family lawyers. Divorce seems pretty transactional as well, but they're also operating on subscription because there's a lot that happens.
That's even
after
more
the
morbid,
divorce.
I think. Like,
Well,
let's
I know.
get married. I'm subscribing to my
I have my
family
divorce attorney on subscription, but there's childhood issues. There's estate issues after a couple divorces. So I do. Now I'm not saying it's universal, but I'm saying I think if we brought some creativity to it, I'm starting to see subscriptions in places that I never thought they'd be before. Like, for example, Porsche. Porsche has a program called Porsche Drive, and you subscribe, and their top package, which is like $4,500 US dollars a month, you subscribe to a fleet of available Porsches. So you have, I think it's 7 models to choose from. You can trade out as much as you want, and they cover everything except gas and tolls. But they pay your insurance. They take care of registration. You never have to worry about maintenance. You call up, you say, hey, I want an SUV. I got friends coming out. Come take away my convertible. They white glove you out an SUV. They white glove away your convertible. You can change back the next day if you want. Now people say, well, how's that different than buying a Porsche or leasing a Porsche? Well, it's not tied to the car. They're not selling you a car. They're selling you a relationship with Porsche. Now Porsche knows a lot about you. They know where you drive. They know what your likes are. They know what you listen to on the radio. They're probably going to monetize that down the road, by the way, some way. But this Porsche Drive program, which is now in like 15 cities, it's incredibly successful. And 80% of the people that subscribe are brand new to Porsche. And my question is, what do you think they'll be driving for the rest of their life? I think a Porsche.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, not much of a push tick, but I get it. But that's the thing that I've been struggling a bit with and discussing a lot with Scott Simmons, who will come onto the podcast as well. Where I'm like, I do a lot of projects where I do like, privacy stuff, terms and conditions, and then it's done. So it's like one big thing, and then maybe people come back, but it's more like small things. So this is something where you're absolutely right. I also still have to get creative, because there's some companies who don't, let's say, constantly need legal advice. So it would be harder for me to say, pay me, €100 a month if you don't need me for 6 months. It's a tough act to sell when the thing that I did for you in the first 2 months is worth multiple thousands of euros. So these are the things that I'm still trying to get my head around, kind of.
Yep, I understand that. And sometimes I think maybe you have to have 2 separate businesses to pull this off in the right way, where your subscription offering is based on recurring value. If there's not recurring value, then subscription's not going to work, unless you're really innovative and come up with a model. And I think Matthew Kerb has done a pretty good job with this, because he's trying to go after people that normally don't even have access to a lawyer, either because they can't afford it or it's too infrequent. But he's like $20 a month, and he's your lawyer. Now, he's got other a la carte prices. If you bring him a 100-page contract that you're about to sign, he's going to charge for that. But he's going to give you a preferred price because you're subscribed to him. So he's only going to work with people who are members. So I'll give you an example of this. There's a company here in the States called Hassle-Free Home Services. And these people come into your house once a month, and they take care of your to-do list, all the little things around the house that you don't like to do on the weekends.
They're just in the US, aren't they? I mean, just asking for a friend. I'm really just asking for my husband, because
this one is. But I bet there's other type of businesses in other parts of the world that are like this. This is a franchise in the States, and they're like $250 a month, and they'll come in and they'll replace your batteries and your smoke alarms. They change your filters and the HVAC. They grout. They fix window screens and door hinges, all the stuff that breaks, and they take care of all these little things. But then let's say you want a deck or you want a bathroom remodeled. Well, if you're a subscriber, they will handle that job for you. Now, they might find a contractor to do it. They may do it themselves if they have a contractor on staff. And they may work it into your subscription price, or they might just charge you a complete one-off separate price for that particular project. They vary in how they handle it. But the point is, the only way to get these guys to do that is if you subscribe to them. So you have to be a member. And they get about 50% of their revenue, by the way, on one-off projects. But they also get that recurring revenue. I subscribe to my HVAC company because we're about to have a heat wave here. And if my air conditioner goes down, they guarantee they will respond in 24 hours, which is a big deal because you can't get these guys when it's hot or cold to come out, in less than 3 weeks, unless you're a member.
So it's not a contradiction to say, look, you've got a subscription for your daily needs, and then there are the one-off projects. And there was one thing that I just thought about whilst you were talking, and I'm just going to put it out there. So, dear clients, now you know, these urgent things that come in, like the data breach, where you have to react within 72 hours and put your notice into the Data Protection Authority, for example. Doing this for a completely new client is an absolute pain. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of really tempted to not do things like that for new clients anymore. And I'm kind of like have my head set on it because I'm thinking like, okay, this is something that I wouldn't do for anyone who isn't an existing client. And then kind of work these things in to say, look, I know your business, I know what you're doing. I'm also helping out in emergency situations, but then you need to be subscribed. You need to be. I'm just talking out loud whilst I'm building projects and prices in my head. So maybe we should wrap this up. Otherwise, I'm just going to spend half of the night coming up with new prices.
But you're thinking in the right direction, because here's the difference. One of the big differences between value pricing and subscription. Value pricing, we talk about scope and out of scope, right? And when there's out of scope things that come up, you do a change order. Usually there's an additional price. In subscription, there is no scope. It's more about what's covered and what's not covered. So you could theoretically have a tier that said, if you're in this tier, the bottom tier, and an emergency pops up, we don't handle that. But if you go to the tier that covers emergencies like a data breach, then you're covered for that. So there can be a separate tier, and then the customer can decide whether or not they want that extra protection. My guess is most of them will take it, but maybe some of them won't, because for whatever reason they have internal, IT people or whatever, but they get to decide. So, but the real difference is covered versus not covered in subscription, and scope, out of scope in value pricing.
I'm also taking notes here. So usually Michael is the only one taking notes for the show notes, but I'm just actually taking like real business notes here. So since my brain's already buzzing and I'm just terrified of what happens if I hang out with you much longer, it's just like sitting here for an hour with you.
Oh, I think it's fun.
It's almost worse than reading your books, but like worse in the best kind of way. At least with the book, I can put like a bookmark in. And so
right, and you can turn me off on the book. Yeah, you can shut it. You can shut the page.
I was trying to word this nicer.
Maybe you got a subscription for Katharina. Like you meet her once a month and give her something to think about.
Okay, now I have to know: is there like a VeraSage subscription for like random advice stuff?
For people like us.
Well, we do have a Time's Up Club, and that's at timesupclub.com, and that goes through the Soul of Enterprise, the radio show I do, and there's a free forever tier, and when you sign up for that, you get access immediately to some additional things that correspond with the Time's Up book. It's not an audio book, but we have interviews. Ed, my co-host on the radio show, interviewed me and Paul Dunn on each one of the chapters we wrote. So I think there's 20 chapters or so in the book. So there's 20 of these files, and it's me and Ed, or Paul and Ed, talking about a particular chapter, the big ideas, what didn't make it into the book that we might have cut or whatever, and just our interpretation of that particular chapter. So maybe as you're reading the book, or if you're in a particular chapter, you could just listen to that audio of that particular chapter
It's
and
like
get
the audio,
even more out of it.
the director's cut audio commentary version of.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not an audio book, but it is the director's cut, exactly.
Yeah, so
It's a bit like we did with Katharina's book.
Yes, a bit like that. But I just feel like that's a bit like, since I bought it with Lord of the Rings, why shouldn't I buy it for your books as well? But to come to a bit more practical matters, and really before this gets absolutely out of hand, we do want to know what kind of tools you use, because we're like tool obsessed. So I know it's not the timesheet, so it's probably not like time tracking software, and it's not how to calculate the billable hours reached by associates in a year. So what software, hardware tools do you use?
Great question. Obviously, I'm an Apple guy, so I literally bleed in 6 colors. If you were to cut me the colors of the old Apple logo, I actually started my career on an Apple because the Big 8 firm I worked for bought all their auditors Apples. We didn't have Windows machines, so I've never really used a Windows machine my entire professional life. So I used to work for an Apple dealer as well, back when they had dealers, way before they had Apple stores. So I use Apple, everything, iPad, watch, phone, and computer. I'm a big believer in AI, and I love ChatGPT and all the other ones out there, Notion, and there's a ton of them. I can't keep track of them all. They all seem to be good in some areas and bad in others, and they kind of complement one another, but I love playing with ChatGPT. I just think it's an amazing tool. I do use Zoom to do the radio show. I do use Riverside to do some professional educational courses.
I've been looking into that as well. It's definitely on my to-do list.
Yeah,
Riverside.
that I have a producer when I do educational courses, and he really likes Riverside because not only does it records, like if this was a podcast, you would get a download of your side, but you would also get a download of my side from my computer. And therefore it takes out that latency usually that happens on Zoom where people talk over one another because of the delay. That doesn't happen in Riverside. Plus it's got pretty good video, and they can edit it the way they want it. I don't do any of that back end work, but the producers really seem to like Riverside. And I do a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of podcasts like this, and a lot of I would say 75% of the time they're using Riverside.
Yeah, I've done a couple of podcasts on that as well, both video and audio, and we're looking at it. And the reason why we're using Studio Link is because for the longest time it was one of the few softwares that recorded every person as a single track to make it easier for me to just mute Michael.
Right.
So.
There we go again.
Well, okay. In your defense, since you've got your new microphone, your audio quality has massively improved.
Thank you.
But for the longest time, if it was on one recording, the quality of one person...
Yeah, it was a bit out of the can, so to say.
Yeah,
but now I've got a roller, and that's better.
It sounded literally out of a can, like a really, really rusty old can. Never mind.
That's my style.
I'll give you one more, two more. A program that we use to handle for our consulting. We do everything on subscription, so people can just subscribe to us, or me, or Ed, or both of us, and we'll have consultations, or we'll even do visits and things like that. But to handle all of that, the payments and everything, we use a program called Anchor, and it's sayanchor.com, and they're an Israel-based company. And I know these guys, I've met with them. They've worked with some of our colleagues in setting up a subscription based program so the customer can cancel whenever they want. They make it really easy, and they handle all the payments right to your bank account, and they charge, basically, it's a flat price of $5 a payment. That's their fee. They don't take 2.5% like Stripe or some of these other outfits. They take $5, no matter how big or small the payment is. It's $5 a payment. So we really like them. They're very flexible. It's easy for the customer to put in their information, and they just make it great. It makes it very seamless. And then the last thing is I'm a big Kindle reader, so I do use Kindle, but I use it on my iPad. I use the Kindle app on my iPad to read the books.
Well, I've just recently bought the Kindle Scribe, and I'm actually very satisfied with it.
I hear they're great. I've never owned one, but my co-host has one.
I like him.
Yeah.
No, I do read more on the apps on the iPad or the phone as well. But your books I do have physical copies of. So in case if I ever stalk you that much, then I'll just have to get you something signed. And before I get more embarrassing, I ask Michael, have you got any questions left?
On to the last one. So Gandalf or Dumbledore?
Oh, geez. This is Lord of the Rings, and
Harry Potter.
Is that Harry Potter?
Yeah. I think that kind of almost answers the question.
Yeah. People ask me Star Trek or Star Wars. I'm not a sci-fi guy.
We've had that in the previous season, so.
Yeah.
If you ask me something like Caddyshack, or I could answer that, but when it comes to science fiction, that's not my genre.
No, that's fantasy. So Lord of the Rings versus Harry Potter, Gandalf versus Dumbledore.
No problem. I'm a huge sci-fi fan, so
yeah.
Yeah.
I, Robot. In fact, our show this Friday is on the book I, Robot. Okay. And I can't believe it. I mean, I've known about the 3 laws, that Isaac Asimov wrote, but I never read the book. So finally I read the book. I have to say it was, for a book written in the 40s, I believe, or late 40s or early 50s, it was incredibly prescient.
Yeah.
In terms of living with robots and the implications of that. It was really interesting from that level.
Yes. I haven't read it myself. I think I don't think I've even watched the movie, but I didn't even know it was that old. I know Asimov's laws, of course, but that's about it.
Yeah, that's all I knew.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Anyway, dear listeners, go read Ron's books, listen to his podcast, radio show, you call it, and if you need all that help, I'm sure they can contact you and get you from a worldwide international help call. But yeah, I'm super excited, and a quick shout out to Sean who did the introduction, because I'm fangirling, and Sean's like, yeah, you should totally invite Ron. It's like, yeah, can you introduce us? So
Sean's great. We love Sean. He came to a Verisage event in Texas, and it was just great meeting him. And I haven't met Scott, but I've heard Scott on several shows, and I really, really like what he's out there doing too. There's so many people out there that are helping firms with these new business models, and I just love it, because when I did it, there was nobody out there helping anybody or talking about it. So I'm thrilled to see it.
But he's up next, and I know you're a tough act to follow. Because I think when we're doing the workshop, he quotes you a lot, and I can spoil that much. Anyway, Ron, thank you so much for coming and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
I've learned so much. And dear listeners, hear you next time.
Bye.
Danke, dass ihr beim Nerds of Law Podcast zugehört habt. Auf unserer Webseite nerdsoflaw.com könnt ihr das Impressum, Datenschutzinformationen und viele spannendere Dinge finden. Dieser Podcast ist durch eine Creative Commons by Non-Commercial 4.0 International License geschützt. Das bedeutet, ihr dürft den Podcast kopieren, mit Freunden teilen, mit der Information, wo der Podcast herkommt, und ihn nicht für kommerzielle Zwecke verwenden. Das Urheberrecht für die Musik liegt bei Mick Bourdain. Ihr findet seine Webseite unter mickbourdain.com. Live long and prosper. Eure Nerds of Law.